Okay, so this is a kind of a first here. I'm doing this demo for Compass Games. It's something I just kind of volunteered to do. I picked up this game, No Peace Without Spain, as part of a bunch of games I was picking up at one time. I try to save up my money and then get several games at once so I can get the free shipping when I order from a certain online vendor. And as it turns out, I needed about $30 more to meet the free shipping threshold, and this game was on sale for about that price, so I decided to pick it up. It's one of those games that was kind of on my radar, but I hadn't really paid a whole lot of attention to because I don't know a whole lot about the conflict that it's portraying. This is the War of the Spanish Succession. It's fought from 1702, I believe, to 1711. The game gives you the option to go to 1713. So it's not something I know a whole lot about, but as I began to play it, I found it's a very, very cool game. So first of all, let me go ahead and cover the information about the map. As you can see, it is a point-to-point map. That's pretty common with card-driven games. There is a certain level of abstraction in this game. There's no naval conflict per se in the game. The conflict is going to center around the land conflict, with the naval side of things being abstracted. There is a control marker on the map you'll see down by Gibraltar, which is marked with a Bourbon control marker, and that indicates that the Bourbon faction has control of the Mediterranean. That's going to change throughout the course of the game based on what happens actually on the land side of things. So mostly this is going to be a land conflict, and mostly it's going to center around the control of fortresses. So as you look around the map, you'll see most of these are land spaces. There are a couple holding boxes. You'll see there's a holding box called the Port of Toulon, and there's a holding box by Vienna that says War Council. Basically, those are boxes that are used to hold one marker at a certain point in the game, and other than that, it's usually kept empty. So the map itself, it's a point-to-point map. There are ports and there are non-port spaces. Ports are easily identified in the game if the name of the city has its label in the ocean. It is considered to be a port. So, for example, if you look at London, London obviously is a port. I'm moving some pieces around there so you can see it because it has its label there in the ocean area. Then, if you look south of there, you'll see Dunkirk also has its label in the ocean, so that's also considered a port, as is Ostend, Bergen-op-Zoom, and Amsterdam. But if you look further inland, you'll see that Arras is inland. It doesn't have its label in the ocean, so that's obviously a land space, and so forth. That's important to recognize because there are certain areas around Spain that may look like they would be a port, but they're not. For example, Barcelona is clearly a port. However, the city up there to the northeast, Girona, is not a port because its label is on the landward side. Valencia, Tortosa, Cartagena, Gibraltar, Cadiz, and Lisbon are all the ports there on the Iberian Peninsula. All right, so most of these land spaces are actually going to be fortresses, and fortresses have the star-like shape to them. So any space that has a star-like shape to it is considered to be a fortress, and most of the spaces are forts. Forts have to be taken by siege, and much of the game is going to revolve around siege warfare. The square spaces are considered non-fortified spaces, and they're easily taken control of. Basically, you spend a movement point there to flip the control marker over. Once a space is marked with a control marker, and I see that in my copy here, I think there's a bug in the module because I see that Besançon doesn't have a control marker for it, so I'll have to fix that. But once a city has been flagged with a control marker, then the control marker will always be there, essentially. It's going to be flipped back over to the other side when the other side takes control of it. In a physical game, you don't have a whole lot of control markers because most often than not, control is obvious. For purposes of the Vassal module, it's just helpful to mark everything with a control marker. At the beginning of the game, there are a few spaces that are neutral. All the spaces in Bavaria are neutral. So you see Munich and Ingolstadt are both neutral. A couple spaces in Italy, Parma and the Papal States are neutral. And the whole country of Portugal is neutral. But once their neutrality is lost, then they will either be controlled by the Alliance or the Bourbon faction. So square spaces easily controlled, fortified spaces less so. Now a lot of these fortified spaces have a number in the middle of them. For example, let's take a look here at Ostend. I'm going to pull some pieces apart here. Actually, some of those are unmovable. Ostend, if you actually click the little globe button on the toolbar, it'll hide all the pieces. So Ostend actually has the number 2 inside it, and a city like Arras has no number inside it. City of Lille has a 3 inside it, as does Turin over in the country of Savoy. What those numbers represent are the strength of the fortress. The higher that number, the harder it is to take that fortress by siege. And so the numbers, the cities that do not have a number in there, that are blank, they basically have a siege factor or siege strength of 1, a fortress strength, excuse me, of 1. So if they don't have a label, it's a 1, and then there's 2s and 3s. Why they didn't just put 1s in the rest of them, I don't know. I think that would have been better. But anyways, so that's what those numbers inside the cities mean. The fortified cities, the numeric value is its siege rating, its siege strength. There are some square spaces, large square spaces, over to the west side of the map, east side of the map. You'll see an Austria home space that doesn't have any pieces in it. And then there's a space that's labeled Subsidy and Empire home space. Those spaces are basically, it's an abstraction of a larger area. They can only be occupied by Alliance faction pieces. So whenever you buy new Austrian pieces with your reinforcement points, your resource points, you can put them in the Austria home space if you want to. You could move into and out of and through the Austria home space. Any of the Alliance pieces can do that, but the Bourbon faction can never do that. The connections between cities are labeled black or red in the game. And this is one minor flaw with the printed copy of the game. It's a little hard to tell the difference. However, a lot of the spaces are obvious. Basically, most of the spaces are going to have black connections between them. Black connections mean anybody can move along those connections. Red connections mean only the Alliance can use those connections. So, for example, here, John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough, has a large army here in Nijmegen. And if he wants to, he could move into the Subsidy home box here, the Subsidy Emperor home box, because it shares a red connection. He's allowed to do that. However, a Bourbon faction army would not be able to pass along that connection because of the red connection there. So essentially that's what prohibits the Bourbon factions from entering those particular large boxes. So anything with red connections is prohibited. There's another important one, and this is the one that'll give new players maybe trouble on their physical copy because it's almost a darker shade of red because of the way it came out in the print. And if you look down at Italy, you'll see there's a connection between Trent and Mirandola. That connection is allowed only for the Alliance. It's a black connection, or it's a red connection. It's not a black connection. So be aware of that only the Alliance can use that connection. That actually is a pretty important deal in the course of game, that the Alliance can make use of that particular connection. Now, as you probably noticed already, a lot of these connections have a little white arrow on it. What is that all about? Well, let's talk about stacking. There are stacking regulations in the game, and a given space at any given moment is subject to a particular stacking limit. And so let me go over what the stacking limits are. There are fertile spaces, and you're going to find most of these in the north part of France, in the French Netherlands there, the Spanish Netherlands, excuse me, that's controlled by the French early on, namely what now is the country of Belgium. The yellow shaded area there up in the north. And then the Dutch Republic also is considered fertile. Here's how you can tell a fertile space. I'm going to move the Duke of Marlborough off to the side and clear his movement track so you can see there's a little green wheat symbol down in the lower left-hand side of the city. That's indicating that that is a fertile space, and there can be 12 cores in that particular space. If you have a space that doesn't have that little wheat symbol, like for example Cologne, it has a stacking limit of 8 cores. And the reason for the little white arrows is the little white arrows will indicate that there is a drop in stacking limit. Inside the large subsidy and Empire holding box and also the Empire home space, there is no stacking limit in there. Thus, when you move from the subsidy box down to Nijmegen, there could be a drop in stacking limit because there's no limit in the Empire box, but there is a limit of 12 in the Nijmegen box. So whenever you're moving along a connection where there is going to be a decrease in the allowed stacking, there will be a little arrow along that connection to notify you that you're moving into an area that is not able to sustain as many troops. So that's kind of an important deal for stacking. Now the stacking is important at the end of your movement, so you want to make sure that you're going to come under the movement regulations. Now, there's one other type of space, and you're going to find most of these in the Iberian Peninsula and also in Italy, and that is the rugged spaces. They have a little mountain in the lower left-hand corner, and pretty much all of Spain is like this. And here the stacking is really regulated down to 4 cores, so you can't get very large armies operating in these more remote areas or these areas with less forage. So you're going to find much smaller armies operating in Spain, and also in parts of Italy have that particular stacking limit. So those are the stacking limits. You can't voluntarily overstack. Stacking limits may only be temporarily exceeded while a force moves through a space containing inactive friendly cores, or when moving into a space for the purpose of lifting a siege. The only time a force may overstack in a space is following a required retreat, after a battle or that sort of thing, or after a successful lifting of a siege. It is not permitted to overstack when intercepting into a space, and so forth. If you find yourself in one of these unfortunate overstacking situations, you're limited as to the number of pieces. The number of pieces that you can activate and move out of that space are subject to the stacking limits. So if I had, for example, 8 units in a 4-unit space, I could activate all those units, but I could only move 4 of those guys out of there. I'd have to leave 4 behind because of the stacking limits. You could only technically activate a number of units equal to the stacking limit there. So that's probably the most complex part of the game, is that the stacking limits are going to change. So with that said, we can talk a little bit about the pieces. So here's the deal with the pieces. Basically, you got 3 types of pieces. You have markers, you have leaders, and you have corps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull apart the Duke of Marlborough's corps, and I'm just going to line all these guys up here in the north part of the map to show you the different pieces. Now what you have here is an army that is composed of 3 different nationalities. Well, actually more than that, but in game terms, 3 different nationalities. First of all, let's look at the Duke of Marlborough. So on Vassal here, I'm going to zoom in on him. He's got 2 values on him. The top number there is his tactical rating. The number 3 is his tactical rating. The tactical rating is basically going to serve as a combat modifier. It's something that's going to help you in combat. The higher that number, the better. The more capable he is. Duke of Marlborough is the most capable leader in the game. The French don't have anyone to match him exactly. The number beneath that, the number 6, is the number of corps that he can command. That's his command rating. Now beneath that, you'll see that there is a shaded portion underneath his portrait, and half of it on the left is orange and half on the right is red. What that indicates is if he commands an army, he can command any alliance army. However, if that army does not have at least 1 Dutch or 1 British, see, the Dutch guys have the orange stripe, the British have the red stripe on the bottom of their corps. If he doesn't have at least 1 Dutch or 1 British corps with him, then his command will suffer. He will not be as effective in combat. He would have his tactical rating would drop by 1, essentially. So instead of being a 3-6 leader, he would be a 2-6 leader if all he commanded were these subsidy corps. So that's the deal with them. Now, this other leader is a replacement leader, and basically he doesn't have any shading under him, which means that he's not restricted. He can command any corps. He has no um, requirements to command a certain nationality. However, he has no tactical rating, so you have to be aware of that. That number 0 up there means he's fairly ineffective. The number 3 is the number of corps that he can command. They can be of any alliance nationality. Now, these two guys together can collectively command a large army. So if the Duke of Marlborough were operating by himself, he could only command up to 6 corps. So he could take, let's see, that's 5. He could take these 6 corps and operate. But to take a 7th corps along, or more than that, he would have to have another leader under his command. And so for that, he would have to have a secondary leader. Now, up to 2 leaders can work together to move an army around. If you have 3 leaders in a space, that's wonderful, but only 2 of them can operate and move together and basically stack their command ratings. And generally speaking, the only time you're going to have really massive armies operating is going to be up in the north, where the stacking limit is up to 12 corps. Most areas of the map are not going to permit a lot of that. So, let's see here. Make sure we get this right.
Joel, just to interrupt, Marlborough needs both 1 Dutch and 1 British corps. He gets a minus if there's missing a Dutch, and a minus if he misses a Brit, and those are cumulative minuses.
Yes, that's correct. I'm sorry, I gave a wrong impression there. Let me line these guys up again because I wanted to show something else going on with the course. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. He's got a dual nationality thing going on with him. So, yeah, he's got to have a Dutch and a British, and it's -1 for each nationality that he has. So he could drop down to a 1 TR if he was just commanding the subsidy corps that we have lined up here. And the reason for that actually is he worked very closely with the Dutch in his campaigns. Since getting the game, I've actually kind of read up on the history of the conflict. It's really kind of interesting stuff. Okay, now one other thing you need to know about corps is corps have basically a full strength of 1 and a half strength of 1/2. Real simple there. A half strength corps is still considered a corps for stacking purposes. That's very important in the game. So you can't, take 2 half-strength guys here and count that as just 1. No, it's 1 as far as combat goes, but for stacking purposes, a half-strength corps is still considered a full corps. So let me put these guys back together again here. And basically the subsidy corps, they represent Prussians, different Germans, basically all kinds of mercenary troops that threw their lot in with the Allies here in this particular conflict. Okay, over on the French side, the French are really easy because their nationalities are greatly simplified. They pretty much command just French troops and Habsburg Spanish troops. The Frenchies with the yellow stripe on the bottom are considered Spanish, and they also will have some Savoy. They have a Savoy corps for a little while at least, because Savoy will eventually change sides in the game. And let's see, I think that's about it. Yeah, they have French, they have Spanish, they have Savoyan, and the Bavarians. The Bavarians begin inactive. There's a special rule about turn 1 that's going to allow Bavaria to be activated. If Bavaria is not activated as a Bourbon ally on turn 1, then it will automatically happen at the beginning of turn 2. So one way or another, Bavaria is going to enter this conflict here. So you have Bavarian troops and the Emperor the Elector, Maximilian Emmanuel. He's situated in Munich. And basically, he has to command at least 1 Bavarian corps, otherwise his tactical rating goes down to 0. I think that's about it as far as the pieces go, so let's go ahead and look at the cards real quick, and then I'll run you through some card play. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag a few cards out onto the map so you can see what we've got here. This is really simple as far as card-driven games go. This is going to be on the simpler end of things. Basically, you're going to have two decks of cards in the game. You're going to have event cards in a deck, and you're also going to have action cards in a deck. Action cards are going to come in one of three different denominations. There can be 1s, 2s, and 3s. And I want to say there's, well, it's in the rule book. I gotta look it up, make sure I get it right. But it tells you how many of each type are actually in the game. And I want to say most of them are 2s, and the fewer number are 3s and 1s. Wouldn't you know it, I can't find it. I know it's in here. Give me just a second. Okay, found it. There were actually 8 1s, 16 2s, and 8 3s in the game. That's what I was thinking. It was a greater preponderance of 2s in the particular deck. Okay, what you're going to do is on most turns you're going to have a hand of 5 of these action cards, and you're going to use those points to do stuff on the map. Now the way the events work is the events are only going to be drawn during the event phase at the beginning of the game turn. So there's in the sequence of play, one of the first things you'll do in the turn is you'll do an event card phase where you're going to draw. Each player is going to draw a card, with the allies always drawing first, and then the Bourbon faction drawing. You draw the card. If it has an immediate effect, you must play that card and enact its immediate effect. Some of the cards will say hold. You may hold in your hand, and you can then trigger it at a given time as directed by the card itself. So that's the only time you're going to hold on to the event cards. Usually most of them are going to be something that's going to trigger right away. There's also a bunch of these cards. I can't remember the exact count of them, but I want to say close to half the cards are actually set aside and will not be added to the event deck until 1708. So that's why this particular card, Poltava, says 1708, add to the deck. That's something that's going to happen automatically. So I'll go ahead and put him back in where he goes. So this is a little bit different. A lot of card-driven games, you have event cards, you have ops cards, they're all in the same deck, and when you draw them, like Washington's War, for example, or Unhappy King Charles, you'll have event cards or op cards, and you can play if you have them in your hand, you have to play the lot you get. Well, in this game, you only are going to have in your hand action cards. The only time you're going to have event cards in your hand is if the event card you drew permits you to hold it until a suitable time when you want to play it. So usually that's going to be the case. You're going to have the action cards here. So you do have maybe a little bit more control over how things work in this game than maybe in some other card-driven games. So in that respect, this game is maybe a little bit different from other card-driven games. On turn 1, there are some special provisions. There's a late start provision, which means that we are not going to do the event cards in turn 1. We're not going to take reinforcements. We actually begin the campaign phase, and each player is going to actually begin with 4 cards in their hand instead of 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw 4 cards for the Bourbons and for the Alliance. And the Alliance has the initiative basically for most things going on during the course of the game. However, when you're playing in the campaign phase, who goes first in the campaign phase is done a little bit differently. And so what would happen, and this will be hard to show in this demo here for Vassal because of the way I made the module, but let's just say for a moment that this was a situation. I'm going to pull a card face down, and you may see this face down, you may not, depends on your password. And in the Alliance, let's say the Alliance would play this card here face down. Alright, both players would play a card. They would flip a card face down in their hand, they would both put them on the map, and then they would both reveal them at the same time. And so I'm going to flip both of these over to show you what happens here. So you only do this on the very first card of a campaign phase. So you flip both cards over, and then you compare the action point value of those 2 cards. And whoever has the highest value there gets to decide who wants to go first, if they want to go first or if they want to go second. And actually, let me make sure I got that right. Hang on. I'm sorry, I play so many games that have a similar mechanic. All of a sudden, I think I was porting a rule from Hellions actually in this. In this game, I'm sorry, if you have the higher value card, then you go first. So in this case here, since both players played the same value, in this case, if you look at the turn track over on the left-hand side of the map, you'll see it says Alliance Initiative from 1702 up to 1707. What that means is the Alliance will then break ties for initiative. So in this case here, since both players would play to 3, then the Alliance would actually go first, and the Bourbons would actually then take their card, put it back in their hand, and that's what would happen. Let's say, for example, also if the Bourbon had played maybe a 1 card, maybe they really wanted to go second in that particular year, then they might play something like a 1, and the other player would play something else, and that 1 for the loser, his 1 will go back into his hand, and then, and this is important, he is not compelled to play that card when it's his turn. So he could play something different. He's not compelled to play that card. However, whoever wins the initiative is compelled to use their card. So in this case here, what would happen is the Alliance faction would have 3 action points with which to do things. So what can you do with your action points? Well, as it turns out, Compass really doesn't like me to put the charts inside the Vassal module, and GMT's like that too. So if you don't have the game itself comes with a great play air aid card, and I got to hand it to the development team. They really did a great job on the play aids, because the play aids pretty much have everything that you need in there. So in the actions chart, it tells you what you can do with your particular points. The most common thing you're going to do is a campaign, which means you take a leader and you move them around. So you can take 1 force. A campaign is you take 1 force and any number of leaders plus the number of corps in the same place, up to 2 leaders combined command rating can operate. And they can spend 3 movement points to move, or if they're besieging a city, then they may try to they may conduct a siege and try to reduce that city down and capture it. The second thing you can do with actions is you can do a transfer, and what a transfer does is allows you to move 2 leaders or 2 corps, or 1 leader and 1 corps from the same or different spaces, and you can move them to different places. If you're moving leaders through a transfer, they get 6 movement points. So this is a great way to reorient your forces on the map, move things around, resituate armies, that sort of thing. If you want to transfer a leader to a different theater, that's what you would do, is you would use a transfer. The deal is, though, you cannot enter an enemy-occupied space with a transfer unless the space already contains an unbesieged friendly corps. So that's the deal with transfers. And if you're moving corps through a transfer, then you can spend 4 movement points. The third thing you can do is you can do replacements, which allows you to do 1 replacement per round. That's a restriction on there. And what it allows you to do is you can take a reduced strength corps that's not under siege with a line of communications to its home capital. That means it's got friendly spaces all the way back to its home capital. You can take and reduce it back to, or restore it back to its full strength. But remember, only 1 replacement per round. So even though I got 3 action points to play with, I could only use 1 of them for that purpose. Also, and this is also important, a corps that takes a particular action cannot take another action during the same turn. So if I take, for example, if I took this corps here, this British half-strength corps, and if I spent 1 action to restore him to full strength, I could not then activate him along with an army to move him somewhere. So he's kind of restricted on that. So that's something else to keep in mind. Rally is Rally is kind of is something that you're going to do after you've lost a battle. Anytime you lose a battle, the entire force that loses the battle is marked as disorganized, and their combat abilities are greatly reduced as a result of that. And so what you can do with a rally is, and you can do one rally per round per leader. And what you can do is you can take one leader plus a number of demoralized cores equal to 1/2 of the leader's command rating. So Duke of Marlborough's got a command rating of 6, so he could actually restore 3 of his cores. Now, basically all of those disorganized markers come off during the winter phase of a given turn. So the only time you're going to rally is if you are in a precarious situation earlier in a turn, or earlier in a year, I should say. Next thing you can do is a C move, and that's one we're going to do here in just a moment. And the last thing is something only the Bourbons can do, and they can activate the Toulon fleet, but only if they've actually built the Toulon fleet during the preceding turns, or earlier in the turn if you've used your replacement, or excuse me, your resource points to build the Toulon fleet. So in the first year of the game, there's no Toulon fleet, so we won't even worry about that thing. All right, so I know that was a lot there. Let me just start pushing things around. I'll show you how this works. C move is really cool. It's very simple. You can activate, you can only do this once per round. You have to roll for success. There's a chance it might fail. But what you'll do is you're going to activate any number of leaders and up to 2 cores, and they all have to start in the same space. The same port space, I should say. And they all have to end in the same port space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the nondescript leader in London, and he's got a British and a half-strength Dutch corps under his command. And you know what? I'll tell you what, I'd really like to have that corps. You know what? He would be good with that. We'll go ahead and do this. We're going to go ahead and activate him, and he's going to do a C move. We'll drag him down to a city that we want to besiege. Now he has to move from port to port. He has to. He does not have to necessarily end at a friendly port. So one of the things that the Alliance will want to do early in the game is to take control of Cadiz, because if the Alliance gets control of Cadiz, then that will allow them to flip the Mediterranean control marker over from its Bourbon side to the Alliance side. So they're going to go ahead and besiege Cadiz. To mark a city as besieged in the game, basically you just put the besieger on top of the besieged. There would be no sense in the Spanish corps there trying to fight. He's better off just hunkering behind the walls. So that's all that will happen there. So that's 1 of 3 actions spent. The next one, there's another priority that the Alliance really would like to do early on, and that is to capture Liège. Because Liège is ripe and ready to fall, actually. So what will happen here is we'll take the Duke of Marlborough and his whole army. We won't leave anybody behind in Nijmegen. We'll take the whole crowd, and remember, he's got 3 movement points, but we're just going to spend 1 of them to move into Liège. Now this could precipitate a battle. So what will happen here, Liège is controlled by the Bourbons, but there's a special thing going on turn 1 only, and there's a Liège marker, which is not movable in the vassal module. And what that marker means is that Liège is a little bit easier to take by siege on turn 1. And when it's taken, you also get a Dutch corps as a free reinforcement there. So that's a special turn 1 provision. Now in this case here, the army under Beaufleur is badly outnumbered, outgunned in combat. But let me explain a little briefly here how combat works in the game. It's a buckets of dice system. Essentially, you will throw 1 die for each corps. Half-strength corps, you add them all up, basically, and you round it up. So if you have 1.5 corps, you'll throw 2 dice. Or if you have just a half corps, you'll throw 1 die. You need 5s and 6s for hits. Tactical rating of 2 leaders in the attacking force there are also added together. So here the Duke of Marlborough's got, let's see, 2.5 subsidy, 1.5 British. That's 4, 5, 6 with the 2 Dutch corps, 7, 8, 9. So he'd actually throw 9 dice at the present time. Whereas Beaufleur would actually throw 3, 4, 5, 6 dice with his tactical rating. He's got 5 full-strength corps and a tactical rating of 1. So he would probably just want to get the heck out of there. Again, losing battles. Once you've lost a battle, your force is kind of defanged for the rest of the turn, unless you spend a lot of points to rally your troops back up. Now, here's the cool thing on the play aid. In the play aid, when it comes to moving into an enemy space for battle, there is a 4-step process that takes place. And this is really nicely laid out in the play aid. First of all, the active force moves into this space, which we've done. Now the inactive player may attempt to intercept if he wants to. So if he wanted to, he's got a leader up here at Antwerp that could try to intercept. Now to intercept, you basically have to roll 1 die. You add the tactical rating of that leader. Unfortunately, this guy has a tactical rating of 0, the guy in Antwerp. So he wouldn't have any modifier there. And you need a 6 in order to succeed. So that guy could even the odds by intercepting, and why not take a stab at it? So he'll go ahead and roll a die, but he misses. So he fails the intercept. There's no penalty as to failing the intercept, except that, you can't do it again. Basically you just don't move. You just stay in place. After the all the intercept attempts have been made, then the active force may attempt to bypass fortified lines. You'll notice on the map that some places have a fortified line marker. In Vassal, they're non-movable. That way they don't, stick to your pieces. You don't accidentally move them around. These are a marker class of pieces in the game, and they come in 2 strengths. They can be fortified line 1s and fortified line 2s. I want to say, I didn't think Bergen had one. You build these using your resource points. You can build these during the beginning phase of a given turn. So here on turn 1, you're pretty much stuck with what's on the map, but you could spend resource points to build more of these. What they do for you is they greatly help the defender. In a fortified level 1, basically the attacker has a -1 die roll modifier, so he needs 6s to score hits. So that's a pretty cool advantage. In a level 2, it's even worse. The attacker, he has to roll a 6, and the defender only needs to roll a 4, 5, or 6 to hit. Basically, he gets a +1 die roll modifier, while the attacker gets a -1 die roll modifier. So fortified lines are a pretty big deal. And if there are fortified lines here, the attacker has the option, the ability to bypass them and basically treat them as though they don't exist. So how that works is they have to dice for it. And to bypass a fortified line, you have to roll a die. You add the tactical rating of one of the leaders in the moving stack. You subtract the tactical rating of the highest rated inactive leader in the space. So here Marlborough would add 3 for his rating and subtract 1 for Beaufleur rating. And then if you're trying to bypass a level 2 lines, there would be another -1 modifier. And if you have a modified 5 or higher, then you have a success, and the fortified lines are basically ignored. In this case, we don't have that, so we don't have to worry about it. But what that's representing is all the little marching, counter-marching that would go on during this particular era of warfare. And it's just a real simple, elegant way to model that. In this case here, we're not going to worry about that, so we go to step 3, and that is the active force. After he attempted to bypass enemy lines, we go to step 4. Inactive player may now try to avoid battle, but only if no interception occurred. So if you successfully intercept, you may not then try to avoid battle. So how does avoid battle work? Well, it's like intercept, but you have a greater success rating on it. You need to roll a 5 or higher. You roll a die, you add a tactical rating of 1 inactive leader that's trying to avoid. You're obviously going to try to pick your best leader to do that. So Beaufleur would have a +1, and a modified 5 or higher will allow for success. But here's the interesting thing. Success is automatic if you are in a friendly fortress space. Liège is a friendly fortress space for the French, so they will not need to dice for that. It will automatically be successful. And what they will do is they will fall back. And the question is, do you want to fall back on Antwerp, or do you want to fall back on Namur? I would say let's go ahead and fall back. Let's fall back on Namur, where we have the fortified lines at least. That leaves a decent force behind in Antwerp. All right. So that basically concludes that phase. You can't do any siege warfare during the same turn that you've done a campaign and moved into an enemy controlled space. So Duke of Marlborough, he's gotten to where he wants to move. He could continue to move if he wanted to, but he got to where he wanted to, so he's going to stop. And now we have spent 2 of our 3 activations. The next thing we want to do maybe is looking at the guys here in the center. Let's go ahead and take a transfer operation. And what we will do with this, yeah, this will be fun. We'll do a transfer operation. And no, actually check that. We'll take a subsidy counter here that's in the Empire box, and we'll just spend it to flip him more to full strength. So that was our 3rd activation for the turn, and now we're done. Alright, so we'll go ahead and discard our card. Now the Bourbon faction, they can play a card from their hand and do something. If anyone has any questions, by the way, feel free to shout out or type your question into the chat bar in Vassal. Dennis, I think, knows this game pretty well, so I mean, he caught my first mistake. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Don Herndon. Just wanted to let you know I've joined.
Hey, great to have you. Hopefully I haven't messed up the rules too badly. I'm notorious for doing that.
I'll let you know, but thank you very much for hosting this.
Oh, yeah, no problem. We're also recording this for YouTube, and then I'll let Ken and the gang at Compass know, so if they want to embed it on their website, they can. So what to do with the Bourbon faction here? Well, this is one of the things I like about this game, is that, okay, Duke of Marlborough is besieging Liège, but what can we do in response to that? Well, we can mess with him. So, the Bourbons might send an army up to maybe besiege Bergen op Zoom, which is fairly lightly defended at the present time. And so sometimes you'll force an enemy to lift a siege by besieging something that's maybe a little bit more vital to him. But let me talk about real quickly a couple of the special turn 1 things that are going on. So during turn 1, there's a couple important little special rules in the game. And one of those is that the city of Ulm, which is over in the Empire area, the green cities on the map, the city of Ulm is flagged currently with the Alliance. However, here's the deal. As the initial action for Bavaria, in any round, the Bourbon player may conduct a surprise campaign to capture the city of Ulm. The Bourbon player will conduct a campaign action. They're going to spend 1 action point to do it with Max Emanuel and a single Bavarian corps. They're going to get them into that city, immediately converting the space to Bourbon control, but there will not be a victory point change. There's something else. Basically, the game is won through victory points. There's something else going on with the numbers inside those fortified cities, and those are also the victory point value of those cities, unless otherwise noted. Some cities might be worth more than the number inside, and so it'll have a VP notation next to it. There's also several unfortified spaces, notably in the heart of France, city of Tours, Clermont, Nevers. They have 5 movement point or 5 victory point values to them. So when you capture them, basically the Bourbons will subtract 5 points when they capture an alliance-held city of Tours. Whereas the Alliance, if they capture Tours, they would add 5 points, and so forth. Whenever you're capturing a city, though, from these special provisions here, like what it's saying here in the special turn 1 deal, if you capture Ulm, there's not going to be a victory point transfer. The only benefit you get is that you've taken a fortress, and actually a fairly strategic fortress, away from the opponent. So, and I probably should have mentioned the victory conditions earlier, but that's over there on the turn track. You'll see the VPs start at 10, and if you look at the turn track, the Alliance, generally speaking, wants to get their victory points up to 30, and the Bourbons want to get them down to 0. So capturing stuff is a pretty big deal, and you can see the Alliance has a long way to go. And most often than not, from what I've seen, is you pretty much need Spain to do it. The title, No Peace Without Spain, well, look at the city of Madrid. It's 10 victory points. So capturing Madrid and holding Madrid, which is not always an easy thing to do because the French are very fickle in the game. That's a pretty big deal. So I think what we'll do here with the Bourbon faction is I'll just drag out a level 2 card here, save some of the other cards for later. And what we'll do with this is we'll do two things. We're going to activate Max Emanuel, and we'll just go ahead and activate Bavaria. I'm not going to sit on that. So that means the spaces are both going to flip over. And Max Emanuel will march to Ulm, and per the special rule here, this can't be intercepted. If Ulm was garrisoned, they would have to vacate the space, and so Ulm will then flip over to the Bourbon faction. And by the way, you'll see this in a little bit, but when you capture a fortress by siege and there's an enemy core in there, usually when the fortress falls, the core is going to be reduced down to its half strength value. And at that point, it will not actually be destroyed. It'll actually get honors of war and be allowed to go to the nearest friendly fortress, which is another very flavorful thing that's added in. I mean, this is very typical the period, and kind of a nice little bit of chrome in the game. Fortresses, as far as garrisoning a fortress, you may have one core as a garrison. So, in reality, I probably screwed up with Beauflair up in Liège, but it'll help the siege along a little bit because... oh, actually, yeah, I'm going to be able to capture that for free. Hang on a second here. If I had to besiege the city of Liège, under normal circumstances, I would probably want to leave a core behind because it would greatly strengthen the fortress. In this case here, there's a special rule, but I'm still getting to that. So, all right, so Ulm has fallen. There's another city that's going to also apply to. The city of Trier pretty much operates the same way. If a Bourbon campaign ends with a French corps in Trier, the city will automatically convert to Bourbon control. The alliance can't do anything to defend against that. Now the deal with Liège. Liège is basically a level 1 fortress while it's under Bourbon control. But if the alliance player takes control of the Liège space, then what's going to happen is you're going to remove that Liège 1702 marker from the game, place an alliance control marker in the space, and Liège basically reverts back to its printed value. Printed fortress strength. So that's the deal there. Dennis, you're saying that I can flip control, but I haven't besieged it yet. Is there a rule that I've missed, or is there some errata there or something?
No, sorry, my bad.
Okay, well, yeah, I thought maybe I'd overlooked something there, so I just thought I'd double check that. All right, so the Bourbons have one more thing they can do here with this card, and might as well go ahead and grab Trier. So we'll go ahead and march up like so, and that will flip him over. And by the way, don't take anything I'm doing as the gospel of strategy for this game, because I'm still learning the intricacies of things. So, if I do something and it's really stupid, a lot of this stuff is just for demonstration purposes. Alright, so that ends that card play, and basically card play is going to revert back and forth. So now the Alliance can play a card, and so they would probably want to play this card here. And what this will allow them to do is two more actions. Well, one of those actions needs to be, let's see what we got going down here in, I'd really like to take Cadiz. But it's kind of an iffy proposition because we have a half-strength Dutch core there. And here's where the situation gets tricky. For the Alliance, I have a level 1 and a level 2 action card in my hand. So that means if I don't try to pursue or prosecute the siege right now, that means I only have 2 more cards to do it. And if I haven't taken it by the end of the year, my boys will all sail home. But I would really like to get the Dutch guy up to full strength. So I will go ahead and do that. He has a line of communications because the Alliance controls the Atlantic, which is the only other sea area besides the Mediterranean. So he can go ahead and flip to full strength. And that's my only replacement action I can take this turn. The second point, we'll use Marlborough to prosecute the siege of Liège. And how this works, it's real simple. In order to prosecute a siege, you have to have a number of corps in the prosecuting army that's at least equal to the fortress's strength. Now, fortress's strength, its defense value, is basically equal to its fortress strength, or excuse me, its defense value. You have to have a number of core equal to its defense value. The defense value is its fortress strength, which is its printed value. And that printed value, if it doesn't have a number, it's considered to have a printed value of 1. Okay. In this case, Liège, because of the Liège marker there, it's a special rule for turn 1, it has a strength of 1. Okay, and added to that, we add a garrison strength. So if I was smart and had left a corps behind from Beaufleur, you know what, just for giggles and grins, let's just assume that I was smart and actually put this guy, left him behind when I avoided. That will increase the strength. The garrison strength is, if you have a full strength corps as the garrison, it has a garrison strength of 2. If the corps is at half strength, the garrison strength is 1. So, the fortress defense value here of Liège is now 1 because of the Liège marker, plus 2 because of the full strength corps. So a total of 3. Alright, now what I'll do is I'll take Marlborough, who's besieging. I roll a single d6. Got a good roll here. It was a 5. And I add some modifiers to this. First, I check and make sure that the besieger, does he have a line of communications back to one of his line of communications spots. I can't remember the exact term in the game, but basically these are cities that have their label in a colored box. For example, Amsterdam, London, Paris, the Austria home space, I believe. No, I don't think that qualifies, actually. I think it's Vienna, Munich, Turin. You can see them around the map, and Madrid for the Spanish. If you cannot trace the line of communications back to one of those, then there's a -2 modifier. Well, that's not the case now. If, let's just say, for example, Beaufleur was in Nijmegen, then the Duke of Marlborough would still have a line of communications back to Amsterdam. However, it would be threatened because Beaufleur would be considered to be besieging Nijmegen because Nijmegen's not flagged with Bourbon control. Okay, so in that case, where you have a threatened line of communication, there's a -1 modifier. And again, that's another cool way to show the typical march, counter-march of this era. If you're besieging a port that has a sea line of communications, basically there's a -1 modifier. So besieging ports is trickier if you don't have a landward line of communication. There's also a special modifier that only applies to the Bourbons, and that's up in Trent and Innsbruck. Unfortunately, with the way I did the markers, the control markers, they're hiding the little blue modifier for Innsbruck and Trent. But on the physical map, or if you hit the little globe button on the toolbar, it'll hide those, and you'll see the modifier there. If you've left a 1 tactical rating or better leader behind, there's a -1 modifier. So if I left Beaufleur behind, that would have been a clever way to try to hold on to a place. But here's the deal: if the fortress falls, then he becomes a victory point liability. So those are basically the modifiers that would apply at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the die. I already rolled it. It's a 5. None of those modifiers apply if you have a 2-rated or a 3-rated tactical rating leader activated for the siege. Then there's a +1. So Marlborough is a 3, so he's going to add 1 to his 5, so that becomes a 6. Also, if there had been a land battle, I should point this out. If there had been a land battle, and if you win by a significant enough margin, you get to place a famous victory marker on the map. It stays on the map until the end of the year. That marker will also give a +1 modifier to any siege in that area, in that space, or in an adjacent space. So losing battles by a large margin can imperil your fortification networks. In this case here, basically he has a modified 6. Looking at the table, what happens is the attacker takes 1 hit and the fortress takes 2 hits. So what's going to happen is the fortress, we'll have to put some markers down here. Yes, and in this case, since Liège has a fortress strength, modified fortress strength of 3, I would have had to have 3 core there. So fortunately, Marlborough took all his buddies along. And what the hits, we'll do the hits on the fortress first. The fortress is going to take 2 hits, so the fortress strength is going to go down from 1 to 0, so we'll put a marker there to note that. And then for the second hit on the fortress, the defending core will have to be reduced a step. So now the fortress defense strength is down to 1, and that's only the reduced strength core providing that. So if they take one more hit, what will happen is the fortress will fall, the core will get honors of war, and be able to move to an adjacent space. Also, since we conducted a round of siege, even if nothing happened or something bad happened, you always get to place a continued siege marker. Or if there's already a continued siege marker, you can flip it over to its +2 side. In this case, we'll just leave it on the +1 side. So Liège is pretty much hosed. Now for losses, if you expand the stack, just double click on the stack of Marlborough, you'll see he's got 3 subsidy corps. They constitute the greatest preponderance of strength in his army, so basically the hit to Marlborough's force will have to come from one of the subsidy corps. So we'll just reduce one of these guys down half step. So we reduce him down half a step because of that. Okie dokie, I think we covered all of our stuff for this turn at Liège. We'll just go ahead and just leave this stuff like so. And we'll discard the card. And on to the Bourbon side. Now what can they do in response? Well, they got this cool level 3 card here, so what do we want to do with this? If I'm not mistaken, if you open the force pool, there's actually a, you'll see that there's a force pool of cores that you can build. I don't believe you can use your action points to build new core from the force pool, but just so you know, you can bring stuff back into play during when you're spending your resource points at the beginning of a turn. And let's see, 3 actions here. And I think what we'll do with these, first of all, there is some understrength guys up here in Italy. So let's go ahead and deal with that. We're going to spend 1 to increase the strength of one of the French corps with the army under Vendôme, I think is how you pronounce his name. So we got 2 left. So with those 2, why don't we do this? Why don't we go ahead and besiege maybe a fortress that would allow the French a line of communications to Bavaria, and maybe threaten. You know what? I'll tell you what. This may not be the best strategy, but it'll be something to show you how things work in the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the army, the generic army here in Trier, and we're going to, well, you know what, that wouldn't be too sharp. Now, there's too many things that can go wrong with that. Tell you what, let's do a transfer order. Transfer order will allow me to spend 1 action point, and I can move 1 leader and 1 corps, or 2 leaders or 2 corps. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the corps in Paris and move him 1, 2, 3, and he will join the army here at Trier. And then I've got 1 more of those generic orders. How about if I take, yeah, let's take another one from, we'll take the French guy that's up in Antwerp, and we'll march him 1, 2, 3, 4. He will also join this army, and that'll set us up for the next card play. We got 1 more action point to spend. And what to do with that? Okay, let's show you how to control a space. We're going to take the army of Vendée. Now, remember, I strengthened one of those French corps, so I can't move with those. But I'm going to take Vendée, and he's basically going to do this. Sorry, I had to answer that guy in the chat bar. He's going to move down to Parma for 1 movement point. Now, this is a campaign, so he's got 3 movement points. He's going to move 1 down here. Now, Parma's neutral, but we'd like to flag that, so we will go ahead and mark that as Bourbon control. for 1 movement point. It costs us 1 more movement point to do that, and then we'll spend our last to move back. And note, since there's no connection between Parma and Mantua, Eugene can't really do anything about that. So that gives us another important little connection there. And that'll be it for them. So back over to the alliance. And this will be really simple with the alliance, because at this point it's basically trying to prosecute 2 sieges. So we'll finish up the Duke's siege up here at Liège. He will have a +2 modifier now, +1 for the continued siege and +1 for his tactical rating. And so that 3 becomes a modified 5. And on the siege table, the fortress will take 1 hit, and he takes 1 more hit to his army. So that basically that third subsidy corps. We'll flip over. I'm sorry if my mic went off when I was doing that. Basically, Duke of Marlborough continues his siege of Liège. He rolled a 3, became a 5, and basically the fortress takes its last hit. Its fortress strength is 1, and it's getting that from the understrength corps, so that corps will get honors of war. And he will travel to join the army of Beaufleur. And the siege marker there goes away, or the Dutch marker, and all the siege markers go away. And now Duke of Marlborough gets a very cool new Dutch corps for his army. Okay, double checking. I need to double check the rules here real quick, because I can't remember if they get the points for that on turn 1. Yes, the alliance will gain 2 victory points. So whenever you take a fortress, see the number 2 in there, that's going to dictate it gets 2 points. If the fortress doesn't have a VP value and it doesn't have a number in it, it's just 1 point. So the marker goes up from 10 to 12. Okay, his last action point of the turn here is over in Cadiz. And now this time, the tactical rating on the leader is... Let me just separate these so you can see them a little bit better. Tactical rating leader is 0, so there's not going to get a modifier for that. The fortress strength is a 1, because it's got no number inside it. It has an understrength corps, and there is a special rule for turn 1 that the Spanish dudes, the Bourbon Spanish dudes, can't get a replacement on turn 1. So I couldn't spend any of the Bourbon points to do that. So the total of fortress defense of Cadiz is 1 for the corps, the understrength corps, and 1 for the fortress rating, so it's a total of 2. And we have to reduce that down to 0 in 2 card plays, which is not going to be easy, because there's going to be a -1 modifier, because the besieging army has a line of communications by sea. And die roll comes over. Ooh, it's a good one. It's a 6, which becomes a 5. And so that will put a hit on the fortress. So the fortress strength is now 0. And now there's a +1 modifier for next turn. And either the Dutch or the British will have to take a hit here. Don't tell my family, but we'll flip that Dutch boy over. Okay, Don, you're saying there's no... Am I understanding that incorrectly? The -1 modifier is not going to apply here?
Did you say it was due to did you say there was a sea line of communications?
Yeah, that's the way I understood that.
Yeah, because the Cadiz is adjacent to the Atlantic, which is always alliance control, so there's no -1. So you had a 1 in 6 chance of taking the space, and you pulled it off.
Oh, okay. I was misunderstanding that. So it's not the besieger's line of communication by sea, right?
Yeah, hang on.
Okay, it says if you're besieging a port that has a sea line of communication, there's a -1 modifier.
Yeah, that's if the defender can trace a line of communications by sea.
So if I was besieging Gibraltar, then that would apply.
Exactly.
Because right now, for those of you just tuning in, Gibraltar is it's one of these spaces that's adjacent to both the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean begins under Bourbon control. That will change once the Alliance controls either Lisbon or Cadiz, or both. So in this case, since I rolled a 6, that was a very happy roll then, because a 6 will inflict 2 hits on the fortress. So the Spanish garrison gets honors of war and will have to travel to Gibraltar because it is the closest friendly fortified space. The Dutch take their hit, and the marker flips over, and that is going to be worth 1 victory point. Now, the control of the Atlantic does not take place immediately. It will actually take place at a specific moment in the sequence of play. After all the actions are done, what we'll do is we're going to have to take care of some Spanish events, and then we will... the Alliance is going to get -2 VPs if the Mediterranean is Bourbon controlled. After that takes place, then you check to see if the Alliance controls Cadiz and or Lisbon, and then that marker would then flip over. So the Bourbon are always going to get at least 2 victory points out of this deal. So that was a very good opening turn for the Alliance. Now the Bourbon faction might as well spend its... it's got 3 action points here again. We'll go ahead and take 1 to flip over the guy that retreated to Namur that's under strength. We'll flip him over, so that's 1 action point. Action point number 2, we will go ahead and try to join... Well, shoot. Let's show a battle. We're going to take the army here at Trier and march it to Landau and then to Philipsburg. Now, the army under the Prince of Baden could not intercept in Landau because Landau is under Bourbon control. So at this point, they have the opportunity to either avoid conflict or fight a battle. In this case, since there's not a lot of time left in the year, I would actually leave a corps behind and retreat before battle, knowing that it's very unlikely that he'll be able to successfully prosecute the siege in 1 turn. In fact, I think it's impossible. But in this case, just for giggles and grins and to show how this works, we will fight a ill-advised battle. And what we'll do is we'll add up the number of corps at full strength, everybody's full strength. If you have any half-strength guys, remember you just round fractions up. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 French corps. We have 4 Alliance corps. And then both leaders have a tactical rating of 1. There's a replacement leader underneath in the French stack that has no rating. So it's basically going to be 6 dice for the French and 5 dice for the Alliance. Now, there is a fortified line here, so we will have to deal with that. So assuming we have no intention of avoiding here, and we're going to stand here and fight, what will happen is, and again, this is such a cool play aid. They did such a good job on this. Kudos to the development team. After you've moved into space, you do all your intercepts. We don't have any of those here. Then you check for bypassing the fortified lines. In this case here, the French leader would get a +1 for his tactical rating, but -1 because of the Prince of Baden's tactical rating. And so he rolls a die and he has to have a 5 or higher. Well, a 1's not going to do it, so he failed to bypass the fortified lines, which means the French will need to roll 6s in this battle, whereas the Alliance only needs to roll 5s or 6s. So we'll just chuck a bunch of dice here for the French first. And they roll a bunch of dice and nothing. And by the way, I've got the vassal module so it automatically sorts the die rolls. So don't freak out if you see them all in numeric order. It's just an easier way to read the results. Now the Alliance gets to roll 5. And this will probably end badly. Yeah, 3 hits on the Alliance. So what'll happen is you can, it costs, one hit will flip a full strength corps. 2 hits can remove a full strength corps, but generally speaking, I think you just want to flip them before you destroy them. So we'll flip 3 of these guys. Next thing we want to do here in a battle is, give me just a moment here, there are some important things here. For the losing side, if you took at least 5 actual hits in the combat where hits were inflicted, or if you lost at least 2 cores. So let's say you only had 2 understrength cores and they were both destroyed, then that would constitute a famous victory. And so what would happen is the winner would get 2 victory points. You put a famous victory marker on the board in the space where the battle took place, and that could influence how sieges work in that space and also adjacent spaces. I think that's all we're going to do here. We do have to check to see, though, if any leaders died. And we don't check for the generic boys. So this guy here, they never die. They're immortal. And I think, actually, these guys... Don, maybe you can help me out with this. Are the... See, this top leader that has a level 1 tactical rating, he is actually the understrength side of Villiers, who will actually be promoted, I think, the next turn. I don't think the replacement leaders can die, can they?
Correct. It has to be named, and so he's still generic.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. So we won't bother with him. But if he were a named leader, the loser can die on a 12 or be captured on a die roll of 11 with 2d6s. The winner can always die on a 12, so we will have to check for the Prince of Baden, and he still lives. So what will then happen is all of this stack is marked as disorganized, which in the vassal module we just put a yellow border around you, and he has to fall back from to the space from which he attacked. And that's basically all that happens there. Now, in future turns, he could spend an action point to rally, in which case he would select 1 leader in the stack and take the command rating, which is the larger number, divide it by 2, rounding any fractions up, and that's the number of core that could be have their demoralized status removed. Now, here's what demoralized does for you, or does to you. You operate normally, essentially. But if you're forced into a land battle, you would only hit on die rolls of 6s. So basically, their capabilities have been diminished significantly. Again, in a normal game, I would not have done that because that was totally ill-advised with the fortified lines there. Ordinarily, what I would have done is march from Trier to Freiburg, which is in between Strasbourg and Ulm. If you control that space, you've linked Bavaria with France, and that can open up all kinds of lovely possibilities. Another thing you might want to do is try to cut off Philipsburg from the rest of the Allied spaces by taking Koblenz, Mainz, Nuremberg, and so forth. With 1 action point remaining, not a whole lot to do here. I think maybe what I would do is take the corps in Munich and march him up to Ulm to join the Elector Emmanuel. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just at this point trying to wrap things up so I can show you the end of turn stuff, and then we'll show you the beginning of turn stuff to conclude the demo. Okay, we're rolling again, and we are finishing up the turn here. We've ended the Bourbon turn 3. That's last card here for the Alliance. Level 1 card. And I was thinking I was going to need to use that for Cadiz, but by golly, we don't really need it. So I'll tell you what we'll do. With 1 point, we'll go ahead and take one of these guys. I'll tell you what, we'll take the guy that's in Cadiz. He took a loss to the Dutch, so we'll go ahead and just spend that 1 point to flip him back to his full strength, and that'll be it for the Alliance. And it's getting down to the end of the year here for the Bourbon. They've only got 1 card left in their hand, too. It's a level 1 card. And in this case, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take the generic leader that's part of that demoralized stack. We don't need to rally anybody because in the winter phase, all demoralized markers are going to be removed. But what we will do is we'll take one of these understrength guys, and we're going to flip him to his full strength side. We can go ahead and give him replacements. And what that does, it has a twofold effect. It will flip him to his full strength side, and it will remove the disorganization from him. It's a little less efficient than a rally because it only impacts 1 unit, but we'll go ahead and spend it there. And that's pretty much it. After the campaigns are all done, after you've played all your cards from your hand, and you must play all your cards from your hand, you may not hold any cards over. When that's all done, then what happens is you go to the Spanish event phases. What you're going to do here, first of all, is we have to resolve control of Madrid. Who's got control of Madrid? So I'm going to reference the rules, make sure I get this right. Basically here, this step only occurs if the alliance took control of Madrid. So since the alliance didn't take control of Madrid, we're going to skip this first step of the Spanish events phase. Next, we're going to adjust the Spanish loyalty marker. If the Bourbons control Madrid and at least 5 fortresses in Spain, the marker will move 1 to the right. Now, if you look at the map sideways, just turn your head 90 degrees to the left, and you'll discover that right means up from the vassal standpoint. So what will happen here is the Bourbon marker will move from the +5 to the +4 side. If the Bourbons control Madrid, but fewer than 5 fortresses, then it wouldn't move. Well, so if the alliance controls Madrid or Barcelona, and at least 5 other fortresses in Spain, it can move to the left by 1. If alliance controls Madrid and Barcelona, it moves left 2. It can move left 3 if the alliance controls Madrid, Barcelona, and at least 5 other fortresses in Spain. So in this case, basically, the Spanish are really fickle in the game. So even if you control Madrid, it's possible actually during the first step that we actually skipped here, that they'll switch back to the Bourbon side and kick the alliance out of the town. In which case you'd have to capture it again, and the Spanish can be very frustrating in the game to the alliance player. So we've adjusted the loyalty marker. Next thing we do is we roll for Habsburg Spanish Uprising. Now, I believe we can only do this if we control the Atlantic, which I don't think qualifies at the present time because the marker has not been flipped. Let's see, this is a one-time event. It's predicated on alliance control of the Mediterranean. And since technically we don't control the Mediterranean yet, nothing will happen here. But next turn, what we'll do is we'll have to dice. We'll have to roll a die to determine whether or not Barcelona rises up. And as time goes on, it becomes more and more likely that they will rise up, because what you'll do is you'll dice against the number on the Spanish loyalty marker. So next turn, and this turn for that matter, if things remain unchanged, a 4 or higher will result in Barcelona switching to alliance control, placing an alliance-controlled core in Barcelona. Also, Valencia, Tortosa, and I think Girona also flip over to alliance control at that moment. So that's something that will happen in future turns, but at this point will not happen. Okay, so now we go to the winter quarters phase, and what this does is it forces all units back into friendly spaces. So if you've got a force that's not in a friendly space, it has to move back into a friendly space. So if we were still besieging Cadiz and in the winter quarters phase came along, we'd have to sail back by sea to another friendly controlled port, either London, Bergen op Zoom, or Amsterdam. All right, so in this case here, I just double-checked everything. I don't see any situations where anybody actually has to move. So now we do remove markers. All of the continued siege, fortress strength, famous victory, demoralized, Toulon fleet, all those markers go away. The only markers that stay on the map are control markers and fortified line markers. And this is really easy in Vassal. You just hit the winter quarters phase button, and bada bing, bada boom, all those things go away. Next thing we do is there's a -2 victory point modifier, so we slide the victory points over to the top toward the Bourbon side, since the Mediterranean is still marked with Bourbon control. And after this adjustment, if there's been any adjustment, then the the control marker of the Mediterranean will flip to alliance control if the alliance controls Cadiz or Lisbon or both. And so since they control Cadiz, it will flip over. In 1711, you got to check for British withdrawal. Peace negotiations can start in 1710 if you're playing the full game scenario. You check for victory. If anyone has met a sudden death victory condition per the victory points track, they would win at this point. So if the VP marker was on 30, then the Alliance would win, or if it was at 0, the Bourbons would win. And then we advance the turn marker. And in the Vassal module, you really don't want to fiddle around with this turn marker, moving it back and forth and stuff, because the turn marker, whenever you move it, it does things in the module. So what's going to happen is, when I move it into 1703, it will automatically adjust the promotion of certain leaders. So now you see that Villar has been promoted in Landau. And also, there's a new leader in Namur, certain Tallard, who was a generic leader on the last turn. I think in the next turn, when you move the marker next turn, the guy that's stacked with Marlborough turns into a Dutch leader, and so forth. So whenever you move the turn marker, just leave it alone. Don't move it back and forth, or it'll do weird things to you. It'll also automatically shuffle the deck on certain turns, because basically the rules are, if you don't have enough action cards in the deck to fill out a deck, or to fill out both players' hands, then you shuffle everything. And so the Vassal module will automatically do it, because that will always happen on the same turns. What we'll do now here is we're not going to play a whole lot more here, but I do want to show you how the event card phase works. So how this works is, in your hand windows, there's a button that'll draw a random event card. So just for grins here, the Alliance draws their card first. I did it backwards, but it won't matter here. I'm actually going to draw another one to make it more interesting. Okay, here's an interesting one. Okay, the Alliance draws first. Now, if they draw a card that has an immediate effect, that card must be played, it must be revealed at the time, and its immediate effect employed. And so in this case, what's going to happen is Savoy switches sides, which can be it can do all kinds of interesting things. I think early on, it actually helps the Bourbon, because the Alliance just doesn't have the strength early on to really help the Savoyan side defend its fortresses. So all the fortresses in Savoy will flip over to Alliance control, and there's going to be some Savoyan Alliance cores that will stack in some of those fortresses, but the French pretty much can have a free hand for a while, taking those fortresses back and getting VPs for it. So I think if it happens early enough, it can actually be a bad thing. But it's one of these wild card things that is going to happen. Likely it's going to happen at some point in the game, and in this case it happened early. I'm not going to go ahead and fulfill all of that. It's just to show you that's the types of events that you have in the deck. The Bourbon, the card that they drew was Command Dispute, and this card says hold until played, which means they could keep that card in their hand and play it as directed whenever they wanted to. In this case, obviously they would play it in a battle situation. So that's the types of cards. Now the way this works, you're only going to draw 2 cards per turn. Now when you get to 1708, there will only be 2 cards. If I remember right, you only have 2 cards left in the event deck. But at that point, you shuffle in all of the 1708 cards. So you have this whole stack of 1708 events that gets shuffled in. So there's always the possibility that you might not ever have Savoy switch sides, because it might be one of those 2 cards that ends up in the 1708 stack, and then for whatever reason ends at the bottom, and you never run across it in the whole course of the game. So every game is going to turn out differently. There's a lot of replay value in the game, just because of the way that the events work, and it's very uncomplicated. It's very simple how that operates. As you probably noticed, around the perimeter of the board there are army markers. So if you prefer, in Vassal I like to keep everything stacked together, but that's just my personal preference. Some players might like to do this and put their leaders in here, and then they could arrange their corps by nationality, which is, it might be a helpful way to do things, and then just put the army marker on the map and reference the particular box whenever they need to find out what's in that army. You can use those in Vassal as well as in the physical copy of the game. Once you've done your event card phase, then what's going to happen is, well, actually, I kind of got things out of order. In 1703, if Bavaria has not already entered the war, it would enter that point. In 1704, Portugal automatically enters the war. In 1708, you do the adding new cards to the event deck, and then you each draw and resolve your event cards. After that, you do the reinforcement phase. You get reinforcement points as directed by the general records track. Over on the right, you'll see that the French have 4 resource points that will eventually drop down to 3 or less. At a certain point, it's likely that a card, I'll find it here and show it to you. It's in the, whoops, I didn't want to do that. It is in the 1708 stack, if I remember right. It is French financial collapse. What this does is it's going to impact the French in a bad way. It basically is going to tie the amount of resource points they get. It's going to tie that and also potentially the number of cards that they draw to the number of wealthy spaces that they control. You probably noticed already, and I didn't talk about it earlier because it's one of those things that only applies to this card. There are certain spaces that have like a little stack of gold coins printed on it. Most of them are up in the Spanish Netherlands. If you use that little globe button on your toolbar, it'll hide all the pieces. You'll see that Ostend, Antwerp, Tournai, Liège, Namur. It's also printed on the card itself. And then way down at the bottom, Naples in Italy and Milan up in the north part of Italy also have those gold coins. The number of those that are French controlled when this card is in play will determine how many resource points they get and how many cards they get. And this is one of these cards that's going to have a persistent effect, and so it has a red border around it to show that. And what you do in the vassal module on event cards, if you do a right click on it, a lot of them they'll say execute event. You especially want to do that for cards that give you pieces, like Savoy switches sides. If I hit execute event, bang, it automatically will move the card to the right-hand side of the map, the upper right-hand side of the map, and it'll give you the necessary pieces that the card would normally generate. That's the only way that you will find those pieces. For French financial collapse, if you do the Control E or the right-click function, it'll put it to its holding box on the map to remind you of its status. Presently, obviously that event's not in place, so the French would have 4 resource points. You basically spend those to flip guys to full strength. If you have a guy that's under strength, 1 resource point will flip him back over to his full size. And you have 4 of those to spend. If you don't spend them all, they don't carry over to the next turn. And you don't reduce the marker, okay? So if the marker's on 4, you leave it there, and that just reminds you that every turn you get 4 points to spend. The alliance has 6 points to spend, and so forth. But this is important. You may not spend more than 2 points per nationality. Now, this mostly applies to the Allies. And the French actually have a special provision. They can use 3 resource points for the French nationality. So, like for the Alliance, let's look at the Duke of Marlborough's army. He's got 3 subsidy corps that are under strength. He can spend 2 of his 6 resource points to flip 2 of those over, but even though he's still got 4 resource points left, he can't spend any more on the subsidy corps because you can only spend 2 resource points per nationality. And then he's got 4 left. He can flip over the British guy there. Don't see any more that are under strength that he really needs to flip over. So what do you do with the rest of them? Well, one of the things you can do is you can build fortified lines. And I'm trying to remember how much they are. I think it's 1 for level 1 and 2 for level 2. Yes, during the resource phase. Yep, got that right. So if he wanted to, in Liège, he could build a fortified line level 2. And by the way, you can only build level 2 lines in a fertile space. The spaces with the little wheat symbol, the green wheat symbol in it. So he could spend 2 more resource points and put that thing there. But at any rate, that's what you can do during the... I should actually make those things movable, but here we go. I'll stack it a little bit better. French have 4 points to spend, and remember they can spend up to 3 for the French nationality, so he can go 1, 2, And surely there's a third one somewhere. Well, 3, 4. We'll put these Spanish dudes up. Or what he could have done in lieu of that, what he could have done is, since the Bourbones actually have a core in their force pool, they could have spent 2 points to bring this guy on at full strength, and he could enter into any home space. So he couldn't enter anywhere in Spain, even though it's Bourbon controlled. He'd have to enter in France because he's a French core. Spanish dudes that you rebuild would have to enter Spain because they're a Spanish core, or into like Milan, or they're color coded. So any of the yellow spaces is where the French dudes could go. And that's essentially the game. I mean, that's pretty much it. If you want to bring somebody from your force pool on at half strength, it'll only cost you 1 movement point, or 1 resource point, excuse me. So that's always an option there too. But that is the nuts and bolts of the game. Now, I tried to show you pretty much how the game works. Went a little bit longer maybe than I wanted to, but once you start to play the game, you'll find it's pretty darn elegant. It plays pretty quick. I mean, it's got a lot of turns, but once you start playing the game, it doesn't take that long to play. Once you've done all your resource points and everything, and you get reinforcements. So the Alliance would take care of all its reinforcements, and then the Bourbon would do their reinforcements. And again, reinforcements, they have to go on their home space. So the French dude or the Spanish dude have to go in Madrid or somewhere in Spain. It would be advisable probably to put him there, maybe in Badajoz. Seville, he's likely to just get hammered. But anyways, these are the things you can do. Bavarian dude would obviously have to go somewhere in Bavaria. The subsidy cores would have to go in the subsidy and Empire home space. That's where they come on. And by the way, the other thing the vassal module will do, whenever like the Savoy switches sides, when I hit the Control E on it, it also removed from play the Bourbon Savoyan core that was up in Cremona, up in Italy. So you need to be aware of that. Whenever you find an event, read the event in Vassal, right-click it. It usually will do something. If it generates pieces and so forth, it'll take care of all that stuff for you. So there is one minor bug in the module. For those of you tuned in late, I just realized that Besançon has lost its control marker. I have no idea how that happened. So as soon as I'm done with the demo, I'm going to fix that and upload a patch onto the Vassal website. Yeah, I think that's about it. If anyone has any questions, I'll stick around. Don, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so it's always great to have the designer on hand. If anyone has any questions, we'll stick around and answer them. But this is definitely a game I recommend.